Okay, hello guys, I'm Tom Koo from the Tom Koo Live channel, and I have very special guests today. So these guys are from Hosho, which translates into security in Japanese, and this is CEO Yo, and you are
Hartej.
Hartej, and your position?
President.
President. Okay. So why don't you guys explain it, very briefly in layman terms, what Hosho is about?
Sure. So Hosho is a cybersecurity firm that focuses on the blockchain space. We mainly have been conducting audits of smart contracts and penetration testing. And we have a team of about 40 or so people on our roster now in Las Vegas. And mostly our engineering team consists of white hat hackers who have a strong cybersecurity background, they have a QA mindset, and they're able to find security vulnerabilities in the smart contracts that are being written. Mainly, we've seen about 100 ICOs to date, and we've audited all those smart contracts to make sure that there's no security vulnerabilities in them, and that those smart contracts do what they're supposed to be doing. And we put a cryptographic seal on those smart contracts, and we publish these audit reports. And without an audit report, an ICO cannot be listed on an exchange. And so exchanges are relying heavily upon our services.
Okay. Yeah, our goal is really to just bring the security in the space just up to a higher standard. We see just so many hacks and problems in the space, and so what we're trying to offer is the companies that need it the most right now, which are companies like exchanges and ICOs or projects that are doing token-based or cryptocurrency-related work, just peace of mind and whatever it is that they're trying to do on the security side.
So are you also helping the exchanges, because there happens to be a lot of hacks these days, right?
Yes, we are. We're trying to help them. There are a number of exchanges that we are working with, and what we can do for them first and foremost is just run a penetration test. And so our team, we have many very prominent hackers, and we'll go through and attack their site in the way a malicious hacker would and try to find vulnerabilities, and we always do. We always find issues that they can improve upon, and even further than that, we try to figure out how those issues came to be in the first place so that they can really rectify or improve their security practices.
So, what do you think is the main reason, these exchanges get hacked? Is it because they are really that vulnerable, or are the hackers too good, or what is it?
They are hacker bait. They have such an immense amount of money that they're holding, and if a hacker succeeds in stealing from them, that money is like immediately. It's not like user data where you have to go to like a black market and sell it. They have that cryptocurrency immediately. So there's a lot more hackers than normal that are attacking these exchanges, and then many of them, frankly, do have poor security practices. They don't take security as seriously as they should, and for many of them, I believe the reason is because this entire space is in such a hyper-growth pattern that they're more eager to increase the number of users that they have and increase their revenues rather than focus on some of those other issues.
So is it curable? Do you think that exchanges can become as tight as banks or other financial institutions?
Absolutely. I think potentially it'll come down from legal or regulatory, but I'm hoping in many instances, like we see these organizations popping up where exchanges are agreeing that they need to adhere to a minimum level of security practices, and I think that's really good for the industry at large, and I think it's also becoming a differentiating factor for exchanges to show their users that they take security seriously,
right, yeah,
especially as more and more of their users get hacked.
Yeah.
And in addition to doing penetration testing of the exchange, we're talking to exchanges, which now is becoming more of a standard globally, that the exchange will only list a token that can show proof that they have a professional audit done. And in many places in the world, in the early stages of this industry, we saw tokens being listed without an audit, or we're seeing people doing not fully professional audits, and token just being listed because there's a rush to just raise the money and get the token trading. And so it's been a big focus of ours to talk to every single exchange and even talk to the regulators, who the regulators want to say, well, if you're in our jurisdiction and you're an exchange, let's set some ground laws about what tokens are you listing, or if you're an exchange and you're in our jurisdiction, how often are you getting a penetration test? Because anytime code changes, you're opening up a room for hacking, and it's super crucial that these regulations are put into place.
But I think it's more important that we need to have some kind of ISO standard kind of type of thing, right? All the if you just say that these ICO projects should be audited before they are put on the exchange, I mean it's a little bit vague because there must be some kind of standard level they have to pass in regard their security level. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think there absolutely should be standards bodies that are formed, and honestly, some of them are actually forming right now. And there's like a meeting in Berlin in September about kind of like smart contract auditing and what that even what constitutes an audit. The exchanges themselves, like there are good practices that we can borrow from the banking industry and from the financial industry that already exist, as far as like doing third-party security audits and using vendors and having certain levels of compliance. And I think a lot of those will transition over to the blockchain industry, and a lot of that stuff will already be covered. And right now, the problem is a lot of those companies are falling below those standards, and it's because those standards aren't yet placed on them officially.
All right. I mean, I read about these smart contract auditing, penetration tests. It's a very, very complicated process. I mean, does it take a long time, and how much does it cost?
It can be very complex. It's a very specific skill set. So the hackers that we have, they're all like very well known in the, for example, like DEF CON, which is a huge conference that a lot of hackers attend. We have people that are like prominent members of that community. We have people that have cleared bounties and found vulnerabilities in sites like Google, Facebook, PayPal, like really large companies that you would think would have a very high level of security. And so there's not too many people that have that kind of skill set, and it's a skill set that can take a while to build. So it's not necessarily something that is easily attained.
All right, but what about, your security, because what I'm asking is that you're working with white hat hackers, right? But couldn't there be a risk that someday they turn their head and actually work against you?
That is always a risk, I suppose, but I mean, it's what we do, like with penetration testing, isn't something that's new by any means. It's pretty much a standard in industries at large already, and there's definitely I guess, precedent for how these type of operations run. And there's no different risk between like a Fortune 500 or a Fortune 100 company, a hacker finding a big vulnerability in them and knowing they could sell that vulnerability on the black market for millions of dollars, whereas they get paid their regular salary working for the company. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but I can't say. I'm not a developer, so I know smart contract. I know I saw the conditions, blah blah blah. But it doesn't mean definitely not that I'm not a developer. I'm not that much tech savvy. But my question is, smart contract is a very new concept, and there must be a lot of creative ways to actually create some new hacks. And how do you catch up with that?
So that is actually probably one of the largest problems when it comes to smart contracts, is that we don't know what we don't know. We don't know what unknown vulnerabilities there are still yet to be undiscovered. And on top of just smart contracts themselves, there's also the Ethereum virtual machine, which we continue to find bugs in and issues. And I imagine it's the same with all protocols that have a smart contract platform on top of it. And so it's something that, as an industry, we're just going to need to, get better at reporting those issues and addressing them as quickly as possible, and coming up with better methodology for discovering those issues as they, hopefully before they become big problems.
Okay, and what else do you do? You audit smart contracts, you try to penetrate, and then there must be some other many areas that you're working on as well, right?
We certainly get asked all the time for many security-related services. There's really only so many things that we can do really well, and so we'll move on to other services once we feel like we've completely we have our process down perfectly for the things that we already do without compromising on our quality there. And we're building out a lot of tools to help us do our jobs better. We plan on open sourcing those tools so that everyone can write safer smart contracts and can test their own platforms to some degree before they come to us. I think that will help bring up the security in the industry. On top of that, I'd say that we're working on a multi-sig wallet. We're working on like a Telegram bot that will catch fraudulent or phishing attempts. I mean, just things that we think can cover as many users as possible for the most effect.
Okay, so in case I mean, right now I don't know, how developed the smart contract process is right now, but there are a lot of innovative projects out there ongoing, and what they do is they talk about all their innovative features in the smart contract and using how they use the blockchain. So it means that they will come up with some new algorithm, right? And it really will complicate the smart contract development process. And in that case, do you think you guys can catch up with these new developments? Because sometimes it could be very innovative, by a genius or something. And in that case, I mean, how do you react to these fast developments?
So the increasing complexity of the smart contracts requires basically increasing more sophisticated tooling. And so, for example, like on Ethereum's Solidity, the testing framework that exists for that is called Truffle. And Truffle is a very immature piece of technology for testing your code, as far as figuring out where inaccessible lines are, or where if you import a safe math library and you're not utilizing it somewhere else. And so I think as like firms like us develop and open source much better solutions than Truffle and other similar suites that are out there, it'll become more mature. Developers will have a better time, an easier time writing more secure code, and then more established libraries will be built and developed as well, which will be heavily vetted by the community, and that will really help increase the complexity of contracts while simultaneously making the language safer.
Okay, so right now, when you have a project to audit or check the penetration, in that case, I mean, is it done like customarily, like in a very tailored fashion, or do you have some kind of template to do that?
We're writing custom tooling for every single project that we approach, and so it's quite unique. It depends on the lines of code, depends on the complexity, and most of all, in terms of pricing, it depends on timelines. In the ICO space, we're seeing companies come at a relatively last-minute timeline, and they're saying, "Hey, well, can you turn it around in 5 days, 7 days?" And we recommend a 4 weeks timeline on general. And in regards to penetration testing, we also ask for about a 4 to 8 week timeline. And when we're auditing entire blockchains, which we've started to audit entire brand new protocols, which is very interesting for us, because when we audit an entire protocol, we also can begin to get a peek at what types of projects and smart contracts will be written on top of this new protocol,
right?
And what problems does this new protocol solve that the previous protocols have not. And so auditing a protocol can take significantly more time than just a small ICO ERC20 contract, but it's very custom
and I mean, but there must be some some kind of testing that you can actually standardize, right? I mean, is there a plan of standardization?
So it depends on what it is that we're testing, but because every protocol is obviously different. For ICOs, if they're raising like a crowd sale and they're creating a token, many of them will adhere to a specific standards. For example, ERC20, and there is a set standard, so we can easily test to make sure that they meet that standard, and that's like often where we catch issues. But to what Hartej is saying about a lot of our custom tooling and the stuff that we do for each individual contract, a lot of it has to do with kind of the business logic, and that's kind of stuff that we still have to do very much manual. And by that, it's like there's a source of truth, so there might be a white paper or some sort of technical specification that, for example, dictates how many tokens are supposed to be released. And if we look at the smart contract and there's a different amount of tokens that are being released than what is set out in the white paper or in their technical specification, then we know there's a problem and we report it to them.
Okay. All right. Then, again, I'm a layman, so please excuse me if I say it wrong. But I mean, for instance, I saw the smart contract to be used as distributing tokens versus other payments, or for data management, to give the data holder back the ownership of the data. I mean, this kind of area. Did you ever have seen a project they already created this kind of environment and you get in and checked it? I mean, did you ever have the kind of experience?
Yeah, there's quite a few projects that we do now in an increasing amount that are, it's beyond just a crowd sale. They're actually building their actual platform. Everything
Right.
from like healthcare management of like patient records to gambling platforms and all sorts of things that people are creating increasingly complex applications that are driven by smart contracts. And they are definitely more complicated as far as like auditing and figuring out exactly what the authors intend for it to do. But I mean, that's why we have been building increasingly sophisticated tooling to be able to handle the debugging process. And
All
figure
right.
it
So
out.
in case when you actually check the penetration of these contracts, I mean, how's the process going? I mean, most probably what I think is that you're not going to get any explanation from your client, right? Because your guys, you will just try to kind of understand by yourself the logic behind the smart contract, and then you try to actually penetrate it. Is that how it works, or you?
No, it's the opposite. We need to get like a technical specification from them on like what it is that they intended to do, and then go and test to make sure that it does that thing. Because if we just like go and start reading the smart contract, it might have no security vulnerabilities, which is primarily what people hire us for, is to find security issues.
Right.
But it might still not do what they intended to do, and that's really the extra piece to the audit. For penetration testing, I mean, that's more, we target more exchanges for that kind of thing, and it's really just finding vulnerabilities that like a hacker would try to exploit.
All right. But do exchanges use smart contracts?
Sometimes decentralized exchanges might,
Now
and
exchanges are starting to issue their own token. That's a new trend that we're seeing.
Yeah, right. But what about decentralized exchanges without any tokens? They are not on blockchain anyway, right? But you still kind of help them with the penetration prevention.
yeah, we can help them with penetration testing, but decentralized exchanges may use smart contracts for the management of the funds.
Yeah.
And basically allowing the users to know in a transparent way that their funds are both safe and that they will be, basically awarded whatever amount for the buys or the sells that they conduct.
Okay, so.